Welcome to episode 332 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourScreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing director Martha Stephens, who just did a period piece drama called To the Stars. We talked through her career and how she was able to get this film produced, so stay tuned for that interview. The SYS six-figure screenplay contest is open for submissions. Just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. The regular deadline ends June 30th, and then the contest closes with the late deadline on July 31st. So just 2 more months to get your screenplays entered. The idea for the contest was simple: find the best low-budget scripts and present them to the industry. I'm defining low budget as less than $1 million US. In other words, 6 figures or less. Every submission will get read by at least 3 professional readers, and I've lined up about 40 industry judges to read the scripts that move out of the first round. We're giving away thousands in cash and prizes to the winners. Once again, if this sounds like something you would like to learn more about or perhaps enter, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 332. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and career letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Quick announcement. A couple of years ago, I set up a Facebook group for SYS Select, but I've never really done much with this group. I don't use Facebook very much personally, so I'm not sure I'm really the best person to run a group like this. I was thinking maybe there's a screenwriter out there who listens to this podcast who might want to help out running this Facebook group. This wouldn't be a paid position, but I'd be happy to give out a free membership to SYS Select. I would say it probably would be like an hour a week. Basically what I'm thinking is just we need someone to kind of engage people on Facebook, post interesting articles that would be interesting to screenwriters, and just generally answer screenwriting questions, that sort of stuff. Just kind of try and build a community around that Facebook page. If you have any interest in potentially running this and helping me with this, just drop me an email, info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. And if you have experience with social media marketing, kind of understand this hopefully better than I do, because as I said, I'm not really that into Facebook. Let me know that in your email too. And again, just send it to info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing director Martha Stephens. Here is the interview. Welcome, Martha, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Appalachian, Kentucky, which is the furthest thing from, I would say, the entertainment industry. And I grew up, going to the little 3-screen movie theater in my town and sort of living vicariously through film. And at a certain point, I think in high school, I decided I wanted to go to film school. And I ended up going to the North Carolina School, the Art School of Filmmaking. And from there, after graduating film school, I had no idea how to even get started or where to go. I felt a little intimidated to go to New York or to Los Angeles. So I ended up waiting tables and writing little tiny personal scripts that I could make for no money. And I made 2 movies, one for $7,000, 2 features, and one for, I think, $25,000. And luckily, both of those played at South by Southwest. And I think I was fortunate to come in at a time where festivals were really engaging with like no budget, low budget filmmaking. So from there, I graduated little by little to bigger movies. So my last 2 movies played at Sundance.
Yeah, nice. And just a quick, just to dig into that a little bit, what was that process like getting into South by Southwest? Did you hire a producer's rep? Was there just a cold submission? Did you know someone there? I'm just always curious to hear, there's always sort of this attitude that you need to know someone. And so often I find it is just a cold submission, but, sometimes the right producer's rep can help too.
I didn't know what I was doing at all because, film school, we studied directors and studied the process of making movies. And I really understood like how, sets function and everybody's role and all of that. But submitting to film festivals was not something that we even talked about because the school was kind of run like a little studio system, weirdly enough. I turned to my friend Aaron Katz that I ended up making this movie Land Ho with. He had a movie at South by Southwest, and so I just kind of picked his brain about like how to go about the submission process. And he, I do think he maybe sent an email to Janet Pearson, that the head over there, that just said, "Look out for my friend's movie." So I did have a little bit of an in that regard. But hopefully that's not the reason that they selected the movie.
Yeah. What was some of the and what were some of the tips that Jason gave you just for making the submission?
Oh, Aaron. He just kind of walked me through like just the you get on without a box and you do this and you do that and like you send a personal email along with it. And so I did those things. It's been like a decade. So I don't exactly remember, and I'm sure it's even changed since then. Like the way, this was at a time where you were mailing physical screeners in the mail instead of submitting like digital screeners and stuff.
Yeah, no, I remember those days as well. So what were your expectations? South by Southwest, especially for a $7,000 film, I mean, that's a really good festival. What were your expectations going to a big festival like that? And were those expectations met, or were there some things that kind of surprised you about this experience?
I think that I was just so excited and like a kid at Disneyland going that I had no expectations. I didn't go in there expecting to sell a movie. All I knew was I was going to be screening my film to audiences, and that was enough for me. So that was great. And I ended up winning like an award, and it was great. And the same with like my first experience at Sundance. I was just so pleased to just even get to be, there and in the company with so many filmmakers like I admired, that just went in with zero expectations. And luckily, like we sold the movie and stuff, but that's not even where my brain was.
Yeah.
Things are different now.
No, so that's great. Thank you for sharing that story. So let's dig into your latest film, To the Stars. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch or log line. What is this film all about?
Yeah, it's a very classical coming-of-age story set in the early 60s in Oklahoma about this teenage social outcast that spends her days attempting to be invisible. And then she befriends this new girl that comes to town, and the new girl sort of helps her see herself for what she really is, which is like a beautiful human being. So it's very much a female empowerment, friendship, sort of in the vein of, I feel like, studio films from the 80s and 90s, like Fried Green Tomatoes. It's that kind of story.
Yeah. So how did you get involved with this project? How early in the writing process did you get involved? Did you get a completed script? Did you get pitched the idea and then help in the development of the script? Maybe talk a little bit about that, just kind of how this script came across your desk and ultimately how you got involved with it.
Yeah, so my producer, an agent sent her the script, and she decided she wanted to option it, and she thought I would be good for it. And so she sent me the script. It's by this great lady, Shannon Cleary. And I read it and I felt instantly like an instant attraction just because I might have a mild obsession with like mid-century Americana, and just the idea of getting to do a period piece I was stoked. And it was beautifully written, and the characters, you wanted to spend time with them, and they were three-dimensional. And yes, like there are certain archetypes here, but it's like it works, it's like a formula that works time and time again. And so I wanted to do it. So I had a conversation with the writer Shannon and kind of pitched her my vision for it, and she liked, I guess, what I was selling, and wanted me to come on to direct. So it was my first time directing someone else's screenplay.
I got you. So now, in a situation like this, is it fairly typical that scripts are coming to your producer is giving you stuff? And the reason I'm asking is because I get people emailing me all the time. They say, well, how can I get in touch with this director or that director? And I'm always just curious to hear from the horse's mouth, what is an appropriate way for writers to, network and meet directors? And what's that flow look like for you? How do those scripts ultimately end up on your desk?
I mean, I have agents and managers that will send me a script if someone submits it to me. But also, I mean, if someone can track me down personally, like I'm at a place where I'm totally happy with like cold submissions, or if they speak to one of my producers or whatever. Like most of the things that I'm attached to right now are either they came from me or they came from my producers. I'm actually not attached to anything that my agents or manager brought to me at the moment. So yeah, I think like if you're, Martin Scorsese, maybe you don't want cold submissions or people tracking down your information, but I'm fine with it.
Yeah. So as this process, you had a conversation with the writer, you got to know her a little bit. I'm curious what the development process looked like. Were there some things of that original draft that maybe you thought didn't work and maybe needed to be tweaked? And maybe talk about that sort of development process. How do you're coming in kind of late to the game where there's already a fairly polished screenplay. How did you approach the writer, and what did that look like in terms of doing any kind of rewrites or tweaks to the script?
And I really felt like my entry point into the story was what I was going to be able to bring to working with the actors and performances and like the visual language of the film. So the tweaks were pretty minor. The only thing I asked Shannon was if she wouldn't mind dialing back some of the melodrama, because it's a pretty, it feels like a 60s melodrama, like a Douglas Sirk film in a lot of ways. And I just thought, as much as I like that sort of thing, sometimes modern audiences prickle at it a little bit. So it's just, there's like a few scenes that it was added a little more restraint to them. But beyond that, it's like pretty much the same story. And then there was maybe one character that I wanted to develop further, like the mother character. Just seemed like on the page she felt a little bit too much like a villain, and I wanted to give her some grace and make all the characters you feel empathy. So yeah, but yeah, I really enjoyed it, the process.
And what advice would you have for writers on taking notes from a director? Just some general guidelines. Maybe there can be something. I know as a writer myself, it's always been difficult, getting those notes. You're precious with your script, and sometimes those can be, hurtful and emotional. And what advice would you have for writers who are potentially going to get notes from a director?
Yeah, it's so hard to say just because it really depends on everyone's personality. I think that I'm really into collaboration, and I don't think that I'm the kind of person that would come in like guns blazing and telling you what's wrong with your script. Like I like it to be a conversation back and forth and just really listen. So yeah, Shannon and I are very close now. I actually stay with her when I go to LA. So like we kind of had a dream, situation in that we really just got each other and enjoyed collaborating. So, but yeah, I don't know how to answer that. Like, cause I know that like right now I'm rereading, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, just like how awful sometimes people were to each other. I guess my advice is try to work with people that you think you'll like working with, because you're going to be engaging with them for possibly years on a project. So be cautious with who you work with.
Exactly. Yeah, good advice. I'm curious. As this process is going along, you said your producer brought the script to you. Did you have any business discussions? Sort of practical marketing discussions about this film with your producer? And I'm just curious to kind of get what your producer was kind of giving you, and how big of how long of a leash he was giving you to be creative. I mean, when I get people coming to me asking for advice, a period piece, drama is about the last thing you would sort of recommend to someone, just from a marketing sales perspective. And so I'm curious, it's interesting to me that your producer is the one that actually championed this project and kind of put it together and brought it to you. What sort of business discussions did you guys have as you're going through this process?
Yeah, I mean, it started out, she had a script. There were no cast attachments or anything. And I think like what our angle was, getting some really young, fresh, interesting actors and making a teen movie, like an endearing teen movie that girls would want to watch at slumber parties. And so we were also trying to kind of hit on the nostalgia factor. Like right now, everyone's obsessed with like the Spielberg 80s. And I tried to push the idea that, well, women in their 30s right now, like we're thinking about how we miss early 90s, like Now and Then and My Girl. So that was my angle, with like how to approach finding the financing for this. And hopefully, a lot of people will watch it this next week when it shows up on demand, and we will get, that teenage female audience that I was hoping to attract.
How long did it take from the time you first read that script? How long did it take before you guys were actually in production?
Let me think. I read the script in a year, maybe a year. Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
And
yep.
Perfect. So what advice would you have for people looking, especially screenwriters, since that's kind of the focus of this podcast? What advice would you have for screenwriters just who are looking to break in? It sounds like your route was sort of starting out with a low budget indie film. Do you recommend that route? Is there some other routes now that you've advanced in your career? Looking back, are there some other routes that you could potentially recommend to an aspiring writer or director?
I mean, I guess my advice would be, I think all too often people are trying to write to appeal to what they think people want, and that doesn't seem like that's a great way to spend your time, I guess. And I would write what you want to write and what appeals to you, instead of trying to like appease whatever is the zeitgeist or whatever you think is going to sell. Because I think that when you're reading a script that's produced strictly for that reason, like you feel it, like on some subconscious level, it doesn't feel like a love or personal. So that would be my advice, and maybe that's like terrible advice. Maybe you should just write like a copycat version of whatever was the biggest movie of the year. I don't know, but
I think without the passion, you don't really have much. I mean, we're here, it's a creative business. So without that passion, what do you really have?
Right. For sure.
So just to wrap up the interview, I always like to ask the guest if there's anything they've seen recently, especially as we're all, trapped at home. Is there anything under the radar you've seen in the last year that you think would be, interesting to a aspiring writer or director?
Well, I love watching, I like revisiting like older films. And this past week I watched Hard Times by Walter Hill for the first time, with Charles Bronson. And it's just such a like lovely human story, but also with action. And I loved it. I thought it was such a like tight little, perfect little movie. So I would recommend finding that and watching it.
Okay, well, perfect. That's a very good recommendation. How can people see To the Stars? Do you know what the release date's going to be?
Yes, it comes out April 24th, and you can find it on all like streaming or whatever platforms like Amazon, Fandango, iTunes, etc.
Perfect. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Anything you're comfortable sharing, a Twitter, Facebook, a blog. I'll round all that stuff up for the show notes.
I don't really do social media too much, but I do have an Instagram page.
Nice.
And you just look up my name and you'll find, like, once a month I'll maybe post a picture of like a beautiful landscape from a hiking trip.
Gotcha.
Like, that's as active as I get. So.
Yep, perfect. Well, Martha, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today. Good luck with this film, and I look forward to hearing from you again with your next film.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Great. Okay, bye.
I just want to talk quickly about SYS Select. It's a service for screenwriters to help them sell their screenplays and get writing assignments. The first part of the service is the SYS Select Screenplay Database. Screenwriters upload their screenplays along with a logline, synopsis, and other pertinent information like budget and genre, and then producers search for and hopefully find screenplays they want to produce. Dozens of producers are in the system looking for screenplays right now. There have been a number of success stories come out of the service. You can find out about all the SYS Select successes by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/success. Also on SYS podcast episode 222, I talked with Steve Deering, who was the first official success story to come out of the SYS Select database. When you join SYS Select, you get access to the screenplay database along with all the other services that we're providing to SYS Select members. These services include the newsletter. This monthly newsletter goes out to a list of over 400 producers who are actively seeking writers and screenplays. Each SYS Select member can pitch one screenplay in this monthly newsletter. We also provide screenwriting leads. We have partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads services, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These leads run the gamut. There's producers looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. They're looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots, all types of projects. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. Also, you get access to the SYS Select forum, where we will help you with your logline and query letter and answer any screenwriting related questions that you might have. We also have a number of screenwriting classes that are recorded and available in the SYS Select forum. These are all the classes that I've done over the years, so you'll have access to those whenever you want once you join. The classes cover every part of writing your screenplay, from concept to outlining to the first act, second act, third act, as well as other topics like writing short films and pitching your projects in person. Once again, if this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, please go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that is sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing actor and writer-director Clark Duke. He's had a good run recently in comedies like Hot Tub Time Machine and Hot Tub Time Machine 2, and now he is behind the camera with his first feature film. It's a film called Arkansas, which he co-wrote and directed. We talked through his career, breaking in, how he got into the industry, and ultimately how he got this project produced. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.